Hello and welcome to another episode of WJ Live powered by the Western Journal. My name's Joey Chester. I'm an assignment editor here at the Western Journal, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Tara Snyder and Grant Atkinson. I was very paranoid about getting their names right.
Perfectly right.
My boss, Josh Manning, purposely messes people's names up, and I didn't want to follow in his path today. We have a really fun show for you guys today. We're going to be talking about Jen Psaki just simply not caring about Americans. And we have the biggest science deniers in America, the Biden administration. I don't think there's been a more blatant denial of science than the move that the Biden admin made yesterday. And then at the end, we're going to talk about AOC has a bit of a challenger that maybe could shake things up in her congressional race. Really quick, if you guys are watching on YouTube right now and you're joining us for the first time, please hit the subscribe button and click the bell to turn notifications on. That way you never miss an episode of WJ Live. So to get started, let's talk about America's least favorite press secretary. Boy, do I miss Sarah Sanders and Kayleigh McEnany.
Yeah.
They were so good at their jobs. Jen Psaki is terrible. And yesterday, her performance was no different. Someone finally confronted Psaki about the supply chain issues that are facing America right now. I think all of us have been impacted by high grocery prices, gas prices, not being able to get things shipped to us in time. We're talking about kids who aren't going to have Christmas presents this winter. Biden is stealing Christmas from kids. It's a big problem. So someone confronted Psaki on this, and her response was terrible. She basically laughed it off and joked about it. We actually have a video that I want to show you guys so you can hear what Psaki had to say.
It was clear in March of 2020 when COVID hit that the supply chains across the world had been disrupted. Even as the sort of work to fight back against COVID proceeded, it was crystal clear that things were not improving on supply chain. People couldn't get dishwashers and furniture and treadmills delivered on time, not to mention all sorts of other things. So why is
the tragedy of the treadmill that's delayed?
Right, the treadmill.
So Psaki thinks, oh, it's the tragedy. It's a high class problem, basically. Oh, you can't get your treadmill, so what? Like, no, Jen, that wasn't the point of the question. The point is, like, people can't get these critical items. People can't get toilet paper. People can't get gas in their cars. Like, this isn't just some high class problem. You guys all remember the White House chief of staff retweeting that tweet about how inflation and supply chain issues are just high class problems. No, in fact, the upper class is the least impacted by this issue. It's people like us. It's people like you that are most impacted. And Biden has done nothing to solve it. His wild plan to fix the supply chain crisis was truck drivers can drive at night. Well, I think any of us who have ever been on a road trip or have driven at night know that truck drivers already drive at night. So it's just this really strange messaging that we're seeing. I want to pin it to you, Tara. Why this messaging? What is the reason? How is this beneficial to the Biden administration?
Why this messaging is because they, first of all, don't really know who they're talking to. They're completely disingenuous. They're completely separated from everyday Americans and everyday American issues. In fact, the State Department just today tweeted about National Pronouns Day.
Yes.
And I can guarantee you, no one on the planet cares about National Pronouns Day. It's just blatantly ignoring the real issues that people are facing. And, the Washington Free Beacon even pointed out that she was joking. And again, it's because it's this level of tone deafness where we're not actually caring about issues. The American people feel forgotten and left behind once again, which is what brought them Donald Trump in the first place. And they're repeating the same steps or mistakes over and over again. And so people are just upset. And even today, I think I saw a Gallup poll that said Biden's numbers are dipping down to 40% or 42% approval. So, there's so many issues here. And I think that's kind of the main one.
Grant, why this messaging? What's behind it?
I don't know. I really don't see a way that this is going to be beneficial for the Biden administration. Like Tara mentioned, there's a lot of outlets who are saying, well, she was joking. Like, it's clearly a joke. I don't know why you're taking it so seriously. It's like, okay, like we realize it was a joke, like she's being sarcastic about the treadmill being late, like we get that she's not being serious, but that's not the problem. The problem is that these very real crises that have been created by the president that she works for are just something that we laugh off. She does it all the time. Every time Peter Doocy asks a question, then she just laughs it off, and she either will launch into a personal attack against him or she'll make some sort of sarcastic comment. And the media treats it as if it's like she's being some great leader. They're like, oh, look at this strong woman. Like
she
fighting.
destroyed Doocy.
Destroys Doocy. Yeah, it's
like,
ridiculous.
No, she said, I'll circle back or something.
Yeah, I'll circle
stupid.
back.
Yeah.
She's been circling back. That's actually why all the ships aren't coming in. They're just circling.
She told them to circle back to the port. Yeah. We'll see you later. I think this really shows like how disconnected the elite ruling class is from the rest of America. I mean, truthfully, Psaki and Biden and other people in the administration, they probably haven't had to deal with these supply chain issues like the rest of us could. You know, Psaki makes $180,000 a year. She probably lives in some, posh Washington, D.C. house or apartment. She lives close to work, so she doesn't have to drive far, doesn't have to deal with gas. Like, these people are so disconnected from heartland America, people like you and I. They just think these issues are non-issues, and they just laugh it off, and they think that it'll magically get better. And this messaging is terrible when the president, I saw another poll today where he's at 36% approval rating. It's underwater. It looks like a Republican's going to win in Virginia soon. The generic congressional ballot is looking terrible for Democrats next year. Like, how could you possibly think that laughing about the biggest issue in America right now is going to do you any favors?
I feel like the only answer to your question, really, for the reasoning for doing this would be that they think that this is their only option. I mean, I don't think that they have any real action steps to take. I mean, the transportation secretary is on paternity leave with his homosexual lover. And I mean, they have no like real plan.
No.
So it's like, I think that laughing is their only option because they can't actually address it.
I have said this on the show before. It's like nothing is real anymore. It's like watching a reality TV show. I mean, the president can barely speak when he's on TV. He never leaves the White House. When he does, it's a complete and utter disaster. Psaki's an utter disaster. Kamala Harris is a disaster every time she leaves. It's like watching, it's almost like a bad SNL skit that they created, and they're just like reading the scripts from some writers at SNL. Like, I don't know how SNL isn't having more fun with this. I mean, they practically could copy word for word what happens in the Biden admin. So what do you guys think is going to be the consequences for Democrats from this messaging? What is going to happen to them next year and beyond because of this just lack of care? Is it going to come back to haunt them? What do you think?
I think it will come back to haunt them because we've seen time and time again, and I know we've talked about it on the show before, is that even Black Lives Matter in New York City has gone against the vaccine mandates. A lot of people are against the vaccines for very legitimate reasons. People don't want to be told what they have to do medically and make medical decisions. And so I think there is a prime example of this radical leftist organization that's literally throwing punches right now to not have this happen. And so I think that you're going to see this wake-up call and this shift because, again, it doesn't matter that we all can sit here and be like, hey, voting has a real implication. It actually matters the policies you're voting on. We've said that for years. And so now we're seeing the supply chain issues. Now we're seeing the prices go up. We're seeing inflation. We're seeing gas prices go crazy. These are real-time issues that are going to impact people. And people are going to go, hey, you know what? I miss when my biggest concern was what Donald Trump woke up and tweeted this morning. I miss when my biggest concern was whether or not he made a fat-phobic comment about Rosie O'Donnell. People miss those issues, and I think that that's really going to come back and haunt them.
Grant?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that you're seeing people be fed up in two different metrics, in my opinion. You see one metric, which is the general public having a disdain for Biden. We've talked about extensively these F. Joe Biden chants, these Let's Go Brandon chants, all these chants talking about how bad Biden is. We saw on Monday, I mean, a bunch of Southwest employees are out protesting the vaccine mandate. I mean, every day there's people who are saying, we are not okay with what the Biden administration is doing. So you see that. Then the second area you already mentioned it a little bit, is in the polls. I think it's going to come a lot in 2022, but you're already seeing it in Virginia, like you talked about. Terry McAuliffe is running about even with his Republican challenger, and
Biden won there by 10 points.
Yeah, he won by 10 points. And to me, that's a great sign, because I went to Virginia Tech, obviously. I have a good connection to Virginia, and I would love to see it go back to being more of a red state like it used to be. But I think that if you see a state like that Biden won by 10 points, go red in the very next year, then that is pretty much an indictment on his agenda and his administration.
I think you're exactly right. And his administration is a complete disaster. I mean, every day it is something else. Yesterday was, I think, one of the most ridiculous days for the administration. We already know that Fauci and the CDC and many people in the Biden admin don't care about science. They don't actually believe in real science, as was the case yesterday. And it's also an anti-woman move that they made. Grant, let's hear about that.
Yeah, so yesterday, the Biden administration decided that they were going to make an announcement that the health secretary, Rachel Levine, who is a man who believes that he is a woman, the previous health secretary of Pennsylvania, then joined the Biden administration to make a political statement. I mean, that was the only reason. They hired him because he believes that he's a woman, he's a transgender, and so they said, oh, this will look great on the resume. People will love this. The radical progressives, they'll love us for putting this transgender person on our administration. So they hired him despite having not a lot of qualifications, which we'll talk about later. But yesterday, they released a statement saying that Rachel Levine has now been promoted to the first ever female 4-star admiral in the public health corps. So the statement said, quote, Admiral Levine now serves as the highest ranking official in the USPHS Commission Corps and its first ever female 4-star admiral. That sounds so great. So great. If you had no idea who Rachel Levine is, then I'm sure you're like, oh, that's awesome. Great news.
Now that Rachel isn't really a Rachel.
The problem is that Rachel is not a Rachel. Rachel is a man. And to me, like you said, it's really an attack on women, because I think having a 4-star admiral is great.
Yeah.
But the problem is that now that you have destroyed the idea of it because you have a man pretending to be a woman and he is the first female admiral, then it means nothing anymore. So to me, I think that's an attack on women. I am not a woman. Luckily, we have a woman here on the show. So, Tara, I want to hear what you think. Is this offensive to you as a woman?
Well, I think it's just, as a woman, it's just like, are you kidding me? It's like, I already am a birth-giving person, apparently, and all of these other, weird, I'll just even call it derogatory names. And so at the end of the day, I just kind of laugh a little bit, because you're going to give someone like Rachel this title and be like, oh my gosh, you're the first person, shattering glass ceilings and what have you. But it's like, if we go with the leftist narrative of like the female struggle and whatever, and there are certain female struggles and issues that go on in life, there are. But to just go, oh, this guy who probably lived at least 2/3 of his life as a man has had the same accomplishment as a biological woman from start to finish, I think it's just sad. And I don't really care if they would have had first transgender 4-star admiral. I'd be like, okay, whatever, good for you. I don't really care. Right. But it's time and time again with trans athletes and these trans individuals who are coming into women's spaces, using a leftist term, women's spaces, and saying, hey, I identify as this now, and I'm going to be the best at it, and I'm going to dominate at it, and I'm going to take away your world title. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You never, ever see trans men going into men's cycling, men's spaces, men's weightlifting,
because
and taking their records.
If they did that.
They would get destroyed. So and so it's really only women who are suffering the consequences of this over and over again. And I guess we could even say, I said this today at our meeting, I'm like, if you two just put on wigs and for the next 20 minutes, we're like, hey, we identify as female, oh my gosh, another glass ceiling has been shattered by the Western Journal, a panel of all 3 women talking on women's issues. Sure. Like, it's just ridiculous. And I think it just shows the left's true view of women, which is that women are a stereotype and that you can just pretend to be a woman and that it's just this little play game and charade time and time again.
Yeah, I've got a major problem with this. I am under the impression, the belief that men and women are created differently and both have unique skills that are useful and valuable and individual traits that make us our own. And so when you appoint someone who is not a woman to a position like this, you're actually taking away that achievement from a woman. And that's super problematic to me. And we see this time and time again. We saw earlier this year, there was I think it was an MMA fighter who was awarded the bravest athlete of the year. It was a man who believes he's a woman who basically knocked the brains out of another woman in a fight.
Yeah.
And then was called the bravest athlete. I don't think there's anything brave about that. And then we just saw in Loudoun County, Virginia, there was a case where a father says that his daughter was raped in a school bathroom by a transgender student. That's all alleged, by the way. I'm not claiming anything happened. He allegedly do it. That's all problematic. And this is the agenda that the left pushes. And it takes away from women, and it's harmful to children, and it's harmful to the culture. And it's anti-science. Like, that's what drives me crazy. The left claims to be the party of science time and time again. This is not science. There are biological differences between the two sexes. And it's just stuff like this is super problematic. It drives me crazy, but it is classic Biden admin.
Yeah, it's not science, and it's not particularly helpful to public health either. She's
No.
supposed to be in a health position.
No.
If this was some, other position in the Biden administration, I would still have a problem with the wording of it being the first female, but I have an extra problem with it in the fact that she's supposed to be the health secretary.
Yeah.
And she is advocating something that is, in my opinion, very detrimental to public health.
Yeah.
Because we don't need a bunch of people, kids especially, thinking that they should just change their gender whenever they feel like it. That's not a thing that can happen. And somebody like this will make that more mainstream in the public health sector, which I think is bad for us as a country. But in addition to those concerns, I just want to talk about a little bit her lack of qualifications or his lack of qualifications, whatever you want to say, to actually be the health secretary just from a policy standpoint. So before Rachel Levine became the health secretary in the Biden administration, he was the Pennsylvania health secretary during the beginning of COVID. And this is an article I'm going to quote from Newsweek in May of 2020. And it says, quote, Pennsylvania's health secretary, Dr. Rachel Levine, confirmed on Tuesday that she recently moved her 95-year-old mother out of a personal care home. Outbreaks in Pennsylvania long-term care facilities make up nearly 70% of the state's coronavirus-related deaths. Now, this was in May of 2020, so it's probably changed. But at that point, when she made that decision, 70% of the deaths were coming from nursing homes. She had policies keeping people in nursing homes, but at the same time, he or she, however you want to say it, decided that he was going to move his grandmother or his mother out of this facility, which suggests that he knew the risks in this facility, and so he wants to protect his own family, and yet at the same time, he's going to have policies in place that prohibit other people from leaving those facilities.
It's the Andrew Cuomo grift.
It's the Andrew Cuomo grift.
He did the same thing. Yeah, I don't know how you could put someone in such a powerful, important position who has that track record of failure. I mean,
and that was before he was named to the Biden administration.
Yes, before Biden won the election. I mean,
So
how could it's just common sense. Like I don't know anything about disease, or I have no expertise in the medical field, but I can tell you that it's probably not a good idea to put COVID positive patients in nursing homes, in long-term care facilities when they have the highest risk of COVID. I mean, we knew that older people would be, the COVID would be more detrimental to them at the beginning of the pandemic. So I think that just shows you he is not qualified for this position. It's quite disturbing that someone with that track record is in the highest level of government. I don't like it.
Yeah, and I guess it just goes back to this common theme that we've seen within the Biden administration, which says rules for thee, but not for me. And again, we just talked about Psaki and all of her issues, and she doesn't see the issue with the supply chain. She's not going to notice the change in her home goods that she's purchasing. She probably has a butler to do that at this point. And so people are actually facing the implementations of these policies time and time again. And the Biden admin just has no clue about real life and what's going on. Because again, their entire platform from the beginning was, we are not Donald Trump. I'm not Donald Trump. I'm kind of just your creepy Uncle Joe that you kind of stay a little bit farther away from at Thanksgiving. And that's the end of it. But then you end up with creepy Uncle Joe and you realize just how bad it is. He's not this harmless guy off in the corner. He also has the henchman Kamala Harris standing behind him. And so I just think that at the end of the day, there's so many of these topics where we see, oh, why do we have to follow this mandate, but the left doesn't? Why do we have to do this, but the left doesn't? And I'm just frankly sick of it, and I think a lot of people are too.
Yeah, I mean, there is no doubt the Biden admin is a disaster. Democrats are in disarray right now. They can't get anything passed through Congress. There's a lot of party infighting. Things are not looking good for them in the midterms next year. And America's favorite socialist may face a bit of a challenge in her reelection next year. Let's hear about that.
Oh yeah, so there's a new guy running for Congress in AOC's district. His name is Desi Cuellar, and he is Hispanic. His family fled Cuba under socialism, so he's very anti-socialism. And on top of that, he was a bartender. So, oh man, I guess right there, that's like the one thing that AOC has to be a congressional candidate, right? So she already is in neck and neck in that aspect. But the other thing that's really interesting about Desi is that he was homeless too. He experienced homelessness. And in New York City, I lived in New York City for some time. Homelessness is a really, really big issue there, and it's only grown exponentially. So he just released his first campaign ad, and I have the first 28 seconds of that here for you.
I was born and raised in a small basement apartment in Queens, New York, by my single mom with the help of my grandparents. My family fled Cuba to escape socialism. But growing up, we went through the same financial challenges that countless families face in this country. I've worked a dozen jobs, and just like my opponent AOC, I've bartended just to make ends meet. But that's where our similarities end. As an adult, I've struggled. I've even been homeless. But I never thought of myself as a victim or blamed systemic racism for my problems. I just worked hard and I never gave up.
So that's the first 28 seconds of his ad. And so kind of based on this, I'm going to flip the question to you guys because we keep talking about 2022. But do you think that AOC should be at all concerned, or do you think that New York's just going to keep being New York and go blue?
Is this guy a Republican?
Yeah.
You know, we saw some of this I think it's great he's running. I think that nutty politicians should be challenged. But I think we saw in 2020, and I think even in 2018, we've seen some races in really blue cities where Republicans run against candidates in districts where they probably don't stand a chance. And like, as much as I really like this guy's message and his background is fantastic, and it's like as close to an apples to apples comparison as you're going to get between AOC and another candidate, my gut feeling is that he probably doesn't have a good chance of beating her, just because like New York is so bad, and that part of New York is so liberal. It's so bad. Like, it just baffles me that like the conditions in that district don't get better, but people continue to vote for these same policies over and over again. AOC, I'm sure, has done nothing for the people in her district. Yeah. Socialism is not going to solve any of the problems in New York City.
Instead, she just got rid of 25,000 jobs and killed an Amazon deal and all of that.
Exactly. So, I mean, we never know what could happen. Could this guy have a chance? Sure. Do I think he will win? Probably not. But I'm glad that AOC is getting a challenge. Like, I think it's good that someone is standing up to her.
Yeah. What do you think, Grant? Do you think it's him or nothing? Or do you think there's someone else that could take her on?
I don't know. I feel like if anyone can take on AOC, it's probably this guy. I have to say, I really like, it's one of my favorite things when somebody who is a member of all these groups that the left loves to say are oppressed, and they think that they have them in their pockets. This guy, he's from Cuba. Yeah. He was a bartender, which AOC likes to talk about. She was a bartender, and she had it so rough, and it's so tough to be a bartender, especially a female bartender, which that guy's a man, obviously. But she talks about how rough it is. She talks about homeless people and how the left cares about them. So I really love when somebody comes out who has experienced all those things, and they say everything that you are saying, AOC and Democrats, is crap. You are lying, and I've been a part of these groups, of these conversations, and I think that your policies are not helping to solve those things. So do I think that he'll win? I don't know. I would tend to lean no, just like Joey said, because of the makeup of that district. But I think if anybody has a chance, it's probably this guy.
Yeah, I think it's I've had this grift before on the show, and I think it's important to bring up. People like this need to run for office. Like, we need more people who are just average, everyday Americans running for office. It's important. DC is, and that's part of why AOC got elected, is because I think people felt like she had lived the life experiences that they had. So if you have ever felt compelled to run for office, I mean, do it. Like, you don't have to be a rich business person or a lawyer or something. Like, this guy, like you said, he experienced homelessness. He was a bartender. He has life experiences that have shaped him, and he has experienced bad policies that would ruin places like New York that he would advocate against in Congress. So I was going to reiterate: if you ever thought about running for office, I mean, do it. We need good people running for office across the country.
Yeah.
So I think his message is really inspiring, and what he's doing is inspiring.
Yeah, and it's great too because his family literally fled socialism, so he knows firsthand exactly what happened. AOC is completely tone deaf. I mean, we can go and talk about all the times AOC is tone deaf. We have an endless supply there, but even her grandma. Oh my gosh, my grandma has a leaky roof. Like, she doesn't have anything. Poor abuela. And then it took Matt Walsh to be like, oh, let me get a GoFundMe going. And so it's just these kinds of examples all over again. But the other great thing about him as a candidate is AOC and these leftist politicians like to claim that they're the party of the working person, the party who's going to come up and fight for the blue-collar American, which is probably a lie ever since my great-grandma stopped voting Democrat. But he actually was in the National Guard and left in 2015 and kind of was plotting his campaign ever since and left to do this campaign. And so you see time and time again that he's kind of like a triple threat to AOC because well, even more so because he's taking off all of these subcategories that the left likes to promote. And so I guess going off of that, we have these great people like Desi Cuellar and all of these people probably sitting at home right now who would be great candidates. So Grant, I guess my question for you first is, why do these people who would probably be great candidates end up not running?
I feel like it's because of exactly what we're saying, and it makes me feel a little bit guilty, I guess. I just said that. I'm glad that Joey made the point of, if you think about running for office, you should do it. It makes me feel slightly guilty that I just said, this guy has no chance of winning. I think that is probably discouraging for people, especially in a district like that, but really anyone who's not in politics. I think there's this general consensus among the American public of, like, if I don't have connections, if I don't know somebody who's a congressman, or I haven't, been in politics for 20 years, then I don't actually have a chance to run. So I think that that's kind of an attitude that probably needs to go away. And the way that will go away is more people like this running and saying, hey, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to try to get office. And also running, for local office. Like, you can start at a low level like that, build up. So I think we need more of those kind of grassroots kind of politicians and less of the people who have been in Washington for their entire careers, like Joe Biden.
I have a story. Grant makes a good point. We'll end the show with this, but I don't think I've ever said this on the show, but back in 2018, I actually ran for the state House of Representatives in Montana. I'd never thought it was something I would do at a really young age, but it was something that someone approached me and suggested that I do, and I felt really compelled to do it. And I had literally zero experience. I was 18 years old at the time. I was like literally barely old enough to vote. And I did it. And I lost. I ran against an incumbent Democrat in a state house race. It was a competitive district. I did decently well. But I felt compelled, like something needed to change. Someone needed to challenge this guy. This guy just been getting reelected to office year after year with no challenge. And I just didn't feel like that was right. I was an 18-year-old college student. And that was all the life experience I had. And, a decent amount of people voted for me. And it's a message that I want to get across to you. Like, you don't have to be some experienced person. You don't have to be old. You can be really young. I mean, how old was AOC when she got elected?
Like 24?
Yeah. Take Madison Cawthorn, for example. He's 25 and he just got elected to Congress, youngest congressman in history. Right. You can do it. If you feel compelled, just throw your hat in. Start at your school board. School boards are critically important right now. Run for mayor, run for city council, run for your state legislature. The policies that impact you the most start locally, and then go up from there. If you feel compelled to run for Congress. Just do it. It's well worth it. I mean, best experience of my life, most likely. With that, our time is up with you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. What we do here at the Western Journal is not easy. We are facing big tech every day and the threats from them and their censorship. They would like nothing more than to take us out so that you could never hear from us again. If you feel compelled to help us in what we do here so we can bring you this show and our truthful journalism, please go to westernjournal.com/join. For a very low expense, you can help support us. This operation isn't cheap. We are a family-run business. We do what we think is really important work. We are one of the only Christian conservative news companies out there. So please, if you feel compelled, support us. And if you're watching, again, please subscribe. It helps us out and make sure you never miss an episode. With that, we will see you back here on Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in.